Some places have an unsettling silence, a silence that doesn't feel natural but forced, as if something unseen is holding its breath, waiting. That's the kind of silence that surrounded the lake that day. And I was there. I saw them. I saw the ones who were last, known to be near those missing girls, but I never imagined I'd be reliving that moment, over and over again, questioning everything. I thought I knew. It was just another workday, a long drive to a factory near the lake. The sun was high, the air thick with heat. I had gotten there early, so I decided to eat my lunch by the water. At first, everything seemed normal, but something about that place felt off. Too quiet, too still, as if the lake itself was watching me. Then they arrived. First, a group of rough-looking duck hunters, their voices breaking the silence as they bragged about their kill. Then, a man and his son unloading fishing gear from their truck. The contrast was strange. Death and innocence side by side. Something about the hunters made me uneasy. The way they moved, the way their eyes scanned the area. And then, there was the father. I finished my lunch, brushed the crumbs from my lap, and got into my car. As I pulled away, I glanced at the fisherman and his son. That's when I saw it. His lips moved, forming a single word. I heard it, clear as day. A slur. My breath caught. I gripped the wheel, forcing myself to look away. Why? Why would he say that? I tried to brush it off, but something about his expression, something about that moment, felt like a warning. The next day, as I drove back to work, something was different. The road leading to the lake was blocked. Police cars, flashing lights. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe just an accident, but deep down, I knew something terrible had happened. I didn't learn the truth until later. 2 teenage girls had gone missing. Their inner tubes were found a mile away, but there was no trace of them. Only their clothes and their phones. Someone had picked up one of the phones and answered it. A fisherman. My breath hitched, the father and son. My mind reeled, piecing together the moment I had seen them. Had I seen those girls? Had they been there just before they vanished? A week passed, no bodies, no signs. The search continued, but deep down, I knew they weren't coming back. The news said a freak storm had created deadly waves that they had drowned. But I kept thinking back to that day, to the hunters, to the father, to the way he looked at me. I would never know the truth, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone did. Someone who had been there. Someone who had watched it all unfold and said nothing. There are places in this world where the past never truly fades, where something lingers, watching, waiting. This is the story of a family trip that should have been ordinary until the night something reached out from the darkness. And what happened the next day should have been impossible. Every year, the family gathered at the same remote campground in Michigan. It was a simple tradition, a chance to reconnect, to share stories, to relax in nature. This year felt no different. The air smelled of pine and burning wood. The cabins sat nestled between towering trees, the pond reflecting the fading daylight. After settling in, a group of them, Red, her sister, and their cousins, wandered toward the playground near the pond. It wasn't far, just within earshot of the adults. The darkness crept in quickly, swallowing the world beyond the glow of their phone flashlights. They took turns telling ghost stories, laughing off the nervous energy, but something in the air felt off, like they weren't alone. The night passed quietly at first. The cabins were small, old, their wooden walls thin enough to let the wind seep through. Red had been sleeping soundly, in the top bunk facing the wall until something woke her. A pressure, light but unmistakable, pressed against the side of her head just above her ear. A hand. She flinched, reaching out to grab whoever was there, but her fingers clutched at nothing. Her sister lay across the room, still curled in her own bed. No one stood beside her. No one had moved. The room was still. Red's heart pounded. She forced herself to lie back down, eyes darting around the room, searching the darkness for something she couldn't see. Morning came, bright and uneventful. Red tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, convincing herself it was just her imagination. But by early afternoon, a dull ache throbbed above her ear, in the exact spot where the invisible hand had pressed against her. She swallowed painkillers, brushed it off, and joined her cousins at the pond. The water was cool against the summer heat. Laughter echoed across the small lake as they took turns jumping off the floating dock. The uneasy feeling from the night before started to fade until something yanked her back. She had just climbed onto the floating dock, watching her cousins prepare to jump in. Then, without warning, two hands slammed down on the top of her head, shoving her beneath the surface. Cold water rushed into her nose, her mouth. She thrashed, but there was no grip, no force holding her under, just the initial, deliberate push. She burst back above the surface, gasping, coughing, blinking through the water, dripping down her face. Her cousins looked at her in confusion. No one was near her. No one had touched her. Red swam back to shore without another word. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. No one believed her, not that she had the words to explain what had just happened. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Had it been an accident? A trick of the water? Or was something still lurking here, watching, waiting for another chance? The family is returning to the campground this summer. Red tells herself it was nothing. She tells herself nothing else will happen. But she remembers the feeling, the invisible hand in the night, the sudden force beneath the water. And she wonders if something remembers her too. Some places are just places. Some places hold echoes of the past. And some places never let go. The house at the end of the street had been there for as long as Jane could remember, its silhouette a dark wound against the night sky. The townspeople spoke of it in hushed tones, warning of strange sounds that echoed from within, of shadows that moved behind boarded-up windows, of those who had dared to enter and had never been the same again. It was the kind of place that didn't just look abandoned, it felt forsaken. And yet, something about it called to her. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something darker. On that cold October night, she stood before the towering structure, her breath curling in the air like ghostly tendrils. The house loomed over her, its facade warped by time, the paint stripped away in jagged streaks, exposing the raw, decayed wood beneath. Vines clung desperately to its walls, twisting up toward the shattered second-story windows like skeletal fingers reaching for escape. The rusted gate groaned as she pushed it open, its hinges screaming a warning. But Jane had already made up her mind. As she stepped forward, the air thickened, pressing down on her like a weight, as if the house itself were watching. The moment her fingers touched the front door, a deep chill slithered through her bones. The door didn't just creak as it opened, it exhaled, releasing a breath of air so cold and stale that it sent goosebumps crawling up her arms. Something had been sealed inside for years, and now she had let it out. Stepping inside, The darkness swallowed her whole. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew, rotting wood, and something else, something foul, something wrong. Her flashlight flickered, its weak beam cutting through the dust-laden air, illuminating the peeling wallpaper that curled away from the walls like scorched flesh. Strange symbols were etched beneath it, not words but warnings. A gust of wind moved through the corridor, though no windows were open. Cobwebs swayed from the ceiling, disturbed by an unseen presence. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally, as though the house itself were breathing in her movements, absorbing her presence. The deeper she walked, the colder it became, until the warmth of the world outside felt like a distant memory. Then, a sound. Soft at first, like a whisper carried through the hollow ribs of the house. Then, a creak from above. Jane's breath hitched in her throat. She wasn't alone. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to run, to leave this place behind. But something deeper, some unexplainable force, compelled her forward. The stairs groaned beneath her weight as she ascended, each step feeling heavier, like she was walking against an invisible current. The hallway stretched before her, lined with doors that shouldn't have been there. Some were barely ajar, revealing only slivers of darkness beyond. Others bore deep, claw-like gouges in the wood. At the very end of the hall, a single door stood open, candlelight flickering inside. Jane felt a pressure in her chest, a tightening, as if unseen hands were pressing against her ribs, warning her to turn back. But she stepped forward, her pulse thundering in her ears. Inside the room, the air was suffocating. A ring of candles burned low, their flames swaying though there was no breeze. In the center of the circle stood a small figure, a child dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her back turned to Jane. She was whispering. The words were unintelligible, but they felt wrong, twisting and curling in the air like living things. Jane tried to move, but her feet were rooted in place, her breath shallow and rapid. The child's whispers grew louder, her shoulders trembling. And then, without warning, the candles went out. Darkness swallowed the room. The temperature plummeted. The silence was thick, suffocating. Jane's pulse roared in her ears as she fumbled for her flashlight, but her fingers were numb, useless. Then came the touch. Cold, clammy fingers wrapped around her ankle. Jane's breath hitched, then a sudden violent yank. She was pulled to the floor, her body dragged backward by something unseen. She screamed, thrashing, clawing at the floor, but the grip tightened. And then, a whisper, inches from her ear. "You shouldn't have come." The next thing she knew, she was lying on the dusty wooden floor. The candles were relit. The child was gone. The house was silent. But the feeling remained, the knowledge that something had changed. Scrambling to her feet, Jane ran, out of the room, down the stairs, through the front door, never looking back. But it wasn't over. Days passed, and she tried to convince herself it had all been in her head. A nightmare brought on by fear. But fear doesn't open doors in the middle of the night. Fear doesn't whisper in the dark when you're alone. Fear doesn't move objects in your home when your back is turned. The first time it happened, she was asleep, only to wake to the feeling of someone standing over her. But when she turned on the light, it all started with a simple text message, an invitation to explore a forgotten house, one wrapped in local legend and fear. Robert, ever the reckless one, had found it and was eager to see inside. Jown, logical and disciplined from his military upbringing, agreed with little hesitation. And then there was Sarah, who never spoke a word but whose expression screamed her unease. She had always been sensitive to things others couldn't see, and tonight she seemed more unsettled than ever. Still, curiosity won over caution. As they made their way toward the abandoned house, the evening air grew heavy, the distant hum of insects fading into an unnatural silence. The house loomed ahead, standing defiantly against time. 2 stories of decayed wood and broken glass, whispering a warning to any who dared step inside. But warnings were meant to be ignored. They entered through a window, the boards creaking beneath their weight. Inside, dust swirled in the moonlight, disturbed for the first time in years. Robert spoke of the legend, the family that once lived here, slaughtered by a man the town called the Reaper, a killer who was never caught. A house where people never stayed past 6 days. The words felt like ghosts in the air, clinging to the walls. Sarah clutched her boyfriend's arm, signing frantically that something was wrong. But it was already too late. The house had chosen them. The moment the window refused to open, sealing them inside, the tension shifted from thrill to fear. Then came the sound. A faint tapping, rhythmic, deliberate. From a room they hadn't entered. A shadow moved, quick, almost imperceptible. And when they turned, Joan was gone. The silence thickened, as if the house itself was holding its breath. And then, red eyes appeared in the darkness, watching, waiting. Something else was inside, and it wasn't going to let them leave. Some places hold an unshakable sense of unease, and on this night, зрення, що відчуття обгорнуте навколо нього, як пістон. The cheap motel off the interstate wasn't the worst in town, but it had an air of quiet neglect, flickering neon lights, stained curtains, and an unsettling stillness that clung to the air. He and his gothic girlfriend had planned a simple errand, a 10-minute walk to grab snacks, beer, and cigarettes before a night of anime binging. The night was cool, their laughter lighthearted, still giddy from the bowl they had smoked. But as they strolled past empty parking lots and shuttered businesses, that feeling of ease began to slip away. A dark, red sedan crept behind them, too slow, too deliberate. At first, he thought nothing of it, but then the car pulled alongside them, the passenger leaning out just enough for his voice to cut through the night. "Yo, that your woman?" His grip on her hand tightened. Something about the man's tone sent a chill crawling up his spine. "Yeah, what of it?" he replied, his words laced with quiet defiance. The man smirked. "How much?" The question hit like ice water to the gut. His girlfriend's breath hitched. He nudged her forward, his own pulse hammering as he instinctively reached into his pocket, fingers wrapping around the handle of his knife. The sedan kept pace, its presence an ominous shadow, a reminder that this night had taken a turn. He whispered to her, low and urgent. If anything happened, she was to run. The gas station was in sight, but safety was still too far. The game had begun, and the night had turned from ordinary to something they might not survive. The story unfolds through a deep, gravelly male narrator voice, carrying the weight of past trauma and hard-earned wisdom. Scene 1 sets the tone with a somber yet reflective delivery, drawing the audience into the protagonist's world. A world where shadows stretch long over cracked sidewalks, where the neon lights of a distant city feel mocking rather than inviting. His words paint a picture of a man who once had purpose, now reduced to wandering the cold streets with nothing but a battered duffel bag and scars that run deeper than the flesh. The narration lingers on the small details, the way his breath fogs in the frigid air, the distant echo of laughter from a world he no longer belongs to, the silent acknowledgement that no one will come looking for him. This is his reality now. As Scene 2 unfolds, the voice takes on a slightly different tone. Still heavy with sorrow, but touched by the dry wit of Wally, the streetwise survivor who has learned to navigate the unforgiving world of homelessness. The narrator captures Wally's rough-edged humor, the way he speaks in riddles and half-truths, always walking the fine line between cynicism and wisdom. His voice emphasizes the bleak setting of the job center, fluorescent lights that flicker and hum like dying insects, walls covered in outdated flyers offering jobs that have long been filled, the muffled coughs and tired sighs of those who have already given up. Through the narrator's voice, we feel the slow, creeping despair settling into the protagonist's bones. But we also sense something else, a reluctant camaraderie, a spark of connection in a world designed to isolate. As the story progresses into later scenes, the narrator's tone darkens, gradually shifting from weary resignation to a quiet, creeping dread. When the strange old woman first appears, his voice slows, drawing out each unsettling detail, the unnatural stillness of her body, the way her gaze lingers too long, the whisper of her breath that seems to slither through the air. He describes how reality begins to feel wrong. The sound design subtly changes, underlying his words with an almost imperceptible hum, as if something unseen is just beneath the surface of the world, waiting to break through. By the time the horror escalates, the narrator's voice is thick with tension, each syllable delivered with a sense of inevitability, as if even he knows there is no escape from what is coming. His tone quickens when the entity finally reveals itself, when the old woman's frail form twists and convulses, when something ancient and unspeakable emerges from within her, unfurling like a nightmare given flesh. The words become breathless, urgent, as he describes the protagonist's paralyzing fear, the way his body refuses to move as the creature slowly turns its gaze upon him. In the final act, the narration takes on an almost reverent, dreamlike quality. The protagonist has survived, but at what cost? The voice is softer now, contemplative, as it speaks of the scars left behind, not just the ones on his body, but the ones burned into his soul. There is a lingering question in his words, an uncertainty that gnaws at the edges of reality. Was the entity real, or was it merely a manifestation of the ghosts he carried within him? The audience is left suspended in that moment of doubt, trapped between belief and denial, between the waking world and the nightmares that never truly fade. It was a quiet night in a small, forgotten town, the kind of place where the streets emptied early, and the only glow came from the neon signs of fast food chains and convenience stores. McDonald's stood at the edge of town, its golden arches humming under the dim streetlights, casting flickering reflections on the empty parking lot. Inside, the employees moved through their routine, the air thick with the familiar scent of fryer oil and disinfectant. It was just another closing shift, just another night. But sometimes horror doesn't announce itself. It sneaks in, settling in the silence between footsteps, hiding in the routine of the ordinary. The phone rang, slicing through the quiet. The manager, C, answered without thinking, expecting maybe a call about a misplaced order or a late-night request for extra shifts. But what he heard on the other end made his stomach tighten. It was Kay, his girlfriend. Her voice unsteady, words tumbling out in a frantic whisper. She had been arrested, not for a crime, but for fighting back. Her abusive boyfriend had twisted the truth, turning the law against her. As she spoke, her voice trembled, filled with frustration, fear, exhaustion. And as the employees listened, a sense of unease settled over them like a thick fog. They had all heard about Kay's boyfriend before. They had seen the bruises. They had read the messages he sent, breaking into the workgroup chat, spewing hatred, making threats. But it was all just online, empty words, right? That's what they thought. Until they saw the headlights pull into the drive-thru. A small, gray SUV. Kay's car. But Kay was supposed to be in jail, and if she wasn't driving it, then who was?